Hey everyone, how's everyone doing tonight? Good, good. I'm just gonna pull this up really quickly. Uh, so, my name is Colin Marston, and I'm a literature student at Lang. And for my fellowship site this summer, I was at Visual Aids. So I'll give a little context as to what sort of organization Visual Aids is. This is from their website. Visual Aids utilizes art to fight AIDS by provoking dialogue, supporting HIV plus artists, and preserving a legacy because AIDS is not over. So Visual Aids is an arts nonprofit that works to sort of support artists with HIV in a contemporary sense while also recognizing the history and legacy of the AIDS epidemic within artist communities. And I thought it would be helpful to sort of contextualize how the organization was founded. So mid 80s New York City, you're at the height of the AIDS epidemic, and tens of thousands of people are dying every month. And there's institutional neglect. The Koch administration is not doing anything, from the highest levels of government down to the art world. From every major institution was failing this group of people that were dying. So there was a lot of grassroots social movements that sprung up in response to this neglect and this demand to get access to pharmaceuticals and to change public health. And one of the most well-known aspects of that is the group ACT UP, which is AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. And one aspect of ACT UP was their autonomous arts collective, which was called Grand Fury. And they did propaganda for ACT UP at different direct actions. And they also did politically motivated art. And around this time in 1988, they did a show at the New Museum called Let the Record Show. And this was a co-curation between Grand Fury and a curator at the New Museum, William Olander, who would go on to become one of the founders of Visual Aids. So I wanted to set up that context of Visual Aids emerging from the context of ACT UP and sort of struggles for healthcare in the late 80s. So what Visual Aids has been doing, they do exhibitions, public events, publications, educational outreach, and since 1991, the creation of the Frank Moore Archive Project, which was what I focused on mostly this summer. They have relationships with many different organizations around the city. For the exhibition that they did this summer called Ephemera as Evidence, they partnered with La Mama and the New School, actually. There was a New School class that curated the show, and Visual Aids helped facilitate that in the space with La Mama. And a big event that they put on is Day Without Art, which is a way for the arts community and for our institutions to come in dialogue about HIV/AIDS. And the New School actually has been pretty great about sponsoring events like that. So how did I find Visual Aids? I guess it was for several reasons. I first heard about Visual Aids from volunteering at the Bureau of this is a really complicated name, the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, which is the city's only queer bookstore. And the owners were talking about it one day, and I was intrigued by it. And I was like, how do I learn more about this history that I feel as a young person hasn't been available to me in a lot of meaningful ways? And also, in conjunction with that, I was doing a radio piece for another Lang class, whose professor is here tonight. We were doing radio stories, and I did a radio story on St. Vincent's, the former hospital at 11th Street and 7th Avenue, that had one of the largest AIDS wards in the United States. And I interviewed a nurse who was working at St. Vincent's as a HIV/AIDS researcher, a nurse practitioner. So it was coming to New York, trying to figure out my queer identity and how I related to queer history. And it was especially pertinent because I think we're in a moment of there's enough time in between the heat of the epidemic where there's this process of historization happening. You see it with movies like The Normal Heart or How to Survive a Plague, and you see narratives like being solidified. And I was curious about what archiving could do to shape my understanding of this epidemic, where it came from and how it has changed today, and what communities have been affected today that were not affected earlier. Also, I was attracted to the fact that this fellowship was very unique in comparison to your ordinary internship. The fact that they provided academic support, financial support, just a sense of communal caring, I feel like, in so many different aspects of your life. And I think that's really rare. So I was attracted to that. At Visual Aids, I mostly focused on their artist registry, which is an archive that collects images and artworks from artists who are living with HIV or who have died of AIDS. And they try to create a comprehensive, inclusive archive. So that means that anyone who's HIV positive can submit work to this archive. And I actually think that's a very unique thing. Because when you think about archiving, you think about what's in the New York Public Library collection. You have curators who pick out what's in there and what voices are heard, and it's really unique that this organization has this forum for any artist with HIV and any artist who's died of AIDS to have a place in this narrative and this history. So I spent long hours of like archival research and like trudging through the trenches of like being alone and like compiling images, which I like to do. But so it was a great joy. Like you had the solitude of like working through the internet and like these archives and like going through like the dregs of history almost, and like what voices get heard today, and like plucking them and like including them in the archive. It was a really surreal experience. And then also simultaneously working with HIV positive artists in the city who are living, who wanted to incorporate their work into the archive. And so that included me helping scan it, Photoshop it, make sure that it's properly, it can be representative in the archive, and having conversations with them and really getting to know the artist members, because I think an integral part of Visual Aids is the community of HIV plus artists that they serve and support through various methods, through, I think most notably, their artist grants that they do twice a year, which is really important for low-income artists with HIV who have so much medical expenses that this organization exists. I think it's really unique. I think it's the only one in the United States that specifically supports artists with HIV in that context. And so you had artists coming in who were bringing in like these wonderful Broadway caricatures that had probably been sitting in their apartment for like 30 years. One of the artist members worked for the Village Voice, and he was the one who's doing all of the sketching, and so I scanned that all in and wrote his biography. And then there was another artist member who was a photographer who documented a lot of New York queer culture pre-AIDS, which was a fascinating portal. Like Quentin Crisp, like these things that I feel are being forgotten post-AIDS. I was also, in addition to the archive, I was helping with their exhibitions, the ephemera as evidence, facilitating discussion, helping set up our exhibitions, helping with their safe sex campaign through the New York City Department of Public Health. They partner with them to provide these condom packets that include artist members' work on little cards with condoms. It's pretty great. I also helped move artwork. They were doing a benefit print to help out with the organization. And I was also reaching out to artist members who were applying for the grant application. It was the season for that. So this is a screenshot of what the digital archive is. There's two archives. There's a physical archive in their office. And then there's a more comprehensive digital archive. And so it's a very unique archive because these images, you go to their website, um, they're there's like they're not intentionally put that way. Each time you click refresh, there's a new batch of artists, and you can search by subject, medium, demographic, or if you wanted to look for a specific artist. And I think that's a really awesome way of democratizing the archive in a unique way. And then this is an artist member I specifically put into the archive, and this is just the format of what an individual artist's profile on the website looks like, with their biography to the left, and then their works in the center, and you can click on it and like zoom it. Yeah. So moving forward, I published a reflection on my time archiving there on their website about a month ago, and they've also asked me, they do web galleries every month, online web galleries. So I wrote an essay for them, and I'm helping do their online web gallery, which will be published, I think, next week. And it's been really influential in grounding my interests in archiving and figuring out narratives for social movements and identity politics, and sort of making the art world and the archive world a place where we think about social justice and questions about what marginalized voices are heard, like really start that conversation. And it's really grounded, this internship has grounded my continuing work, curating an art exhibition at the New School in November called Grounding Future Queer, and I'm also at Book Forum right now, and the archiving helps with like independent research and doing that. Yeah, I just wanted to read a little excerpt of a poem that I thought was relevant. So this author is called Jacques Ruban, and this is just an excerpt from his poem, Something Black. Against the grain of your annihilation, this, my ransacked memory of you. But if I plunge into this via negativa, the figure I'll find is not on high, and I expect no revelation. I do not call your not dead being to an afterlife. I don't expect to recognize you waiting in some between the worlds. There is your name, I can say it, I can erase the line that crossed it out in letters heavy with place. You've left me a picture with your stamp on it, on the very rectangle of reality it represents, and you are there, in the place where you alone are absent. Thus, out of what's ended I fashion a truth of not accepting that you're not the silence. So yeah, that's it.
Are there any questions or comments for Colin?
Yeah, I was just wondering how you felt this kind of visual archiving worked with what we did in our class together with oral history. And do you think that these two kinds of archiving do they relate to each other? Are they in tension with each other? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I thought that there's so many connections between the two, and the oral history is what led me to the archiving of visual objects. So I think that there is a great connection between visual culture and the history of oral storytelling, and the preservation of that, and the preservation of memory in both of those acts, for groups of people that aren't always heard or remembered. Like, these are specific mediums that we can remember the things that like structures of domination don't want us to remember. So yeah.
All right. And